Exactly 100 years ago to this day,
Insert date here.
the groundbreaking Laura Pendlebury franchise was born. At the time, it was nothing more than a handful of rough notes and crudely drawn cats scrawled on a beer mat by Albert Solzhenitsyn in the thatch in Polton. Scribbles loosely based on Fyodor Dostoevsky's science fiction stories, Geoffrey Chaucer's forays into the carry-on genre, and Anton Chekhov's How to Cook Small British Mammals with a Blowtorch for Adventure Scouts, Volume 1. Now Britain's oldest man, we caught up with Solzhenitsyn at work on his latest venture, Four Sheets to the Wind in the Gardener's Arms, Thornton.
Albert Solzhenitsyn, as the creator of the Laura Pendlebury Adventures, how much of an influence did your contemporaries, such as H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, have on the original scripts?
I am 138, you know.
It was widely reported at the time that in 1885 you witnessed the premiere of the Lumiere brothers' Arrivée d'un Train on the Gare à la Ciotat. What sort of impact did such a cultural event have on the Laura Pendlebury Adventures? Where did you get the inspiration for those first few stumbling steps into audio drama? Did it come to you in a sudden thunderbolt sort of moment? Or was it more of a gradual realization that perhaps...
His ass is prolapsed. Stand clear.
100 years of Pepperpots and time travel. The unofficial cash-in on the Laura Pendlebury Adventures.
The early days of broadcasting were fraught with difficulties for those working on audio dramas, as Professor Hilary Smearcrack of Asheville Road College's Ancient and Misogynist Media Studies Department explains.
Early days of broadcasting were fraught with difficulties for those working on audio dramas.
Winthrop Rumpole, drunken know-it-all at the Fisherman's Arms, Fleetwood. You've never bothered to study any old media broadcast of any sort. Perhaps you could offer us your uneducated opinion on a matter you know nothing about, just like your mates do every morning on the BBC News.
Well, the thing about early mass media, you see, was it didn't have no sound. It was a major drawback if you was an audio dramatist. It wasn't much cop for the Foley artist neither. There was hundreds of them with the UB40s, every doll office in Lancashire, Hughes, taken round the block, all consistent of poets and lyricists in flat caps with whippets. Take a listen to this by way of example. See, it's crap. That was an extract from the audio version of Cleopatra, for God's sake.
Despite the limitations caused by these technical drawbacks, aided by the early onset of senility, Albert Solzhenitsyn persisted with his time-travelling creation, penning scripts at an alarming rate of 27 per hour. After years of silent struggle, he eventually emerged from the wilderness, making the breakthrough for which he'd longed, with the invention of the wireless radio in 1932.
Of course, back in them days, women weren't allowed to act. It was considered to be the profession of sluts. Nothing short of dropping your drawers and sticking your bum in the vicar's face. So the parts of Pendlebury and Jenkins had to be taken with men.
I say, Polly, old chap, isn't that the gigantic slobbering walrus about around you?
Could be, Laura. Certainly got the right shaped head and no mistake. I'll try to entice it into that clever trap using me womanly wiles. Thank God I ain't got a John Thomas like what blokes have, because that might put it off.
Emily Pancake, you were the producer of the Laura Pendlebury Audio Adventures back in the 60s, not to mention the only woman working at Messy Productions at the time.
Yes, I know. Why are you telling me this?
What was it like being employed in what was effectively an exclusively male bastion?
Well, every morning ahead of light entertainment would be several small black children with a stick as everyone else sat around smoking pipes. During brunch, we'd watch gay Swedish porn films. They had to be of a homosexual nature because women still weren't allowed to act. As the only female, it was my job to produce the programmes, make the coffee, bake Victoria sponges, run errands to the corner shop, and be molested. But you can't really blame them. They were a fussy but lovable bunch of old bigots. It was a different culture back then.
And what about those infamously small, messy production budgets? How did you manage to produce quality programming on, what was it now, absolutely nout?
The Messy Productions executives were all members of the House of Lords, and therefore used to dining on swan's eggs and llama flesh, so there was bog roll left in the cod as well as those fat bastards that consumed it. We had to be very creative, but I reckon we pulled it off.
Brazil, Polly, old girl, isn't that a massive stage for flashlights and stuff and shit?
I reckon you're right, Laura, old cock. Look, it is only blooming coming to rest on Kirkham Church spire, ain't it? Quick, help me, do the aeroplane.
steady with your erratic riding, Polynesia, old bitch. Watch your hard, low-flying rather stick out on a bit of spring.
Big things come here. Boom!
By the late 1960s, Arthur Arkwright, the original actor to tackle the role of Polly Jenkins, was starting to suffer from drunken grumpy old giddiness. This, coupled with the drama's live transmission, frequently meant that mistakes occurred which couldn't be edited out.
Contracted herpes off the slag. We're on the air. So, Polly, old sprat, I'm the Laura Pendlebury from the future to rescue you from the clutches of the evil Baron von Moustache. I said, it's me, Polly, the Laura Pendlebury from the future, here to rescue you. Polly, old sprout, aren't you glad what I've come from the future?
Fuck off, you old shaggy.
Then, on the 31st of September 1975, tragedy struck. The entire cast was killed in a freak accident involving a hot dog vending machine and a lubricated bottle of Coleman's mustard at Blackpool Stanley Park. Seizing the opportunity to radically shake up the status quo, Messi Productions executives immediately replaced their lead character with a younger man, the Commissioner's nephew, Cecil St. John Fotheringay Sandwich III to be exact. Now serving 8 years in Broadmoor Prison following his conviction under Operation U-Tree, Sandwich recalls his time on the set.
Well, it were a lot of fun, you know, and we were always mucking about and playing jokes and stuff. Like this one time I set fire to a tea lady's head and then pretended I was putting it out by kicking her in the fist with my dog Martins. Another time we dismantled a pepper pot and nailed the mutant up on a piece of wood. Then we hit it again and again until his head burst. Of course, they didn't keep them original tapes back then, so we get away with that. They destroyed them as a cost-cutting exercise, they said. But I reckon it was because they were crap.
Nowadays, the search for these classic missing episodes, many of which featured the earliest known recordings by Julius Gregson, the voice perhaps most recognisable by modern-day listeners as Laura Pendlebury, is conducted on a worldwide basis by a small but dedicated team of bespectacled geeks. From time to time, fragments surface in Chinese brothels and Glaswegian strip clubs. They are painstakingly restored by Messi Productions sound engineers for immediate release on double the average cost CDs.
The terror of episode 1.
The Pepperpots have taken control of the space station, Polly. Break out the...
Cannons and...
Let's blast them!
to smithereens.
Choose, Jeff, that's only for...
Push down your weapons towards the old bag and step
What am I supposed to be reading?
until your eyeballs bulge.
Boom, 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 boom.
Oh no.
Bang! Despite Messi Productions' couldn't give a toss attitude, the Laura Pendlebury Adventures began to climb steadily in the ratings, reaching its peak one Saturday night in August of 1983, when a freak electrical storm caused all the television and radio stations in Britain, apart from the one running the current episode, to black out. Listening figures reached a staggering 23, but the celebrations were cut short as rumours concerning the show's director, Timothy Ethan Constable, and a number of underage rent boys from Polton began to circulate. Rumours so shocking that even Esther Ransom was forced to turn a deaf ear. Mrs. Penelope Scone of the Lytham St Anne's Sock Knitting Guild takes up the story.
It was well known what Timothy Constable was up to during rehearsal breaks. He'd come back on set with latte froth all round his gob and grass stains on his knees. And he was always being accused of pinching young boys' bottoms.
What would he do then?
He'd take them home and have them stuffed and mounted on shields above his fireplace.
It was around this time that Guthrie Streebling Boylecock, the head writer for the Laura Pendlebury Adventures, was discovered to be dead. In fact, he'd been decomposing for over 16 years. After his moss-covered corpse had been removed from the chair with a spatula, the position of chief script advisor was taken by Brian Hughes, often referred to as Messi Productions' version of Stephen Moffat, because he's fat with curly hair. Under Hughes' new editorship, sweeping changes were immediately made to the cast, as indeed were various blackmail threats by desperate actors such as Michelle Harris and Terry Sedgwick. We caught up with said actors and actresses at various locations around Britain and Australia.
Juliet, Wilhelmina, next. What was your relationship like with Michelle Petunia Harris after she took over from Lily Langtry in the role of Polly Jenkins?
Straight off the record, I couldn't stand the fat old bag. What would happen? She'd turn up every morning with a bucket of KFC and hide in the broom cupboard and refuse to share it. That's what that Hughes bloke. I don't know what he's done to gerbils, but whenever he sees one of them, it runs off with its paws over its arse. Whatever you do, don't broadcast that, or I will have your bollocks for garters.
Michelle Petunia Harris, how did you find your relationship?
Yeah, whatever. Can't stand the stuck-up old bag. She takes a dump in the percolator every morning. It's things we don't know, but we've got on security camera wiping her ass on the cat.
That is albatross, Edward. How would you describe?
Assholes, a lot of them. I only agreed to work in that Pendlebury rubbish because I was desperate. I hadn't eaten anything other than Melbourne dock workers' boots for 8 months. Sales were down on my light in the fridge book, still available from all good stockists of Random House, and at paper pulp mills all across this wide brown land of sweeping plains and randy wombats. And there was nowhere else left to turn. The male prostitute route was definitely a non-starter.
Brian Lochmoff Hughes, what sort of relationship did you have with your cast?
They forced me to sleep with them, all of them, at the same time, which hurt like buggery because Cedric's in Australia. I'm still walking bow-legged now. He made me do unspeakable things with his beard. Then Gregson wiped her arse on it.
Despite the fraught and complicated relationships in the cast, the Laura Pendlebury Adventures themselves continued to thrive, achieving ecstatic new heights of listenership, sometimes upwards of 33 individuals a month. Commercial cash-ins quickly became available at Martha Clogg's Bucket and Spade boutique on Fleetwood Esplanade, as the current owner, Mabel Fatarse, will now elaborate on.
That's right. We had all sorts of stuff, such as Pepperpots in the shape of Pepperpots. Actually, they were just ordinary Pepperpots, but we'd tell customers that they were from the Laura Pendlebury Adventures, and they'd say, "Who's that then?" And we had Polly Jenkins padded annas, which were just beach towels nicked from the Pembroke Hotel.
Surfing on the financial wave of such commercial tat, Messy Productions found itself rich. The Laura Pendlebury Adventures and related sales of heroin by the T-Boy were bringing in more than 8 million Portuguese dollars a year, enough for the company to invest in other projects, such as visits to the brothel and buying off officers from Operation U-Tree. By the late 1990s, Laura Pendlebury had become a global brand name, allowing Messy to relocate its headquarters to Trinidad, which was why it came as such a shock when Sir Michael Spade, the Director General, pulled the plug.
Lord Spade, exactly why did you cancel the series when it was at the height of its popularity?
They couldn't stand the bloody thing. None of them could act. That Pendlebury woman was a common fat turd with all the grace of a pot-bellied sow in the rutting season. Commie homosexual lefties, a lot of them bloody shower of shite. If it had been up to me, I'd have frog-marched him onto the sands of Fluke Hall and had him fisted by a rhinoceros.
Later that year, Spade was found guilty of grand buggery during a visit to Buckingham Palace, stripped of his title, his boxer shorts, his Cuban cigar, and his unconvincing ginger toupee. He was then incarcerated at Her Majesty's Anal Pleasure in Lancaster Castle. The Laura Pendlebury Adventures were back, with an illegal digital sound effects library at its disposal and an international listenership.
Yeah, I was very excited about that. Breaking into the American market. One listener they had. Later turned out it was just one of their regulars on holiday, but it was enough for them to push for a special appearance on the long-running children's magazine program Boo Magpie.
Hello.
Yeah, milkers.
Now, you might be wondering why the studio's full of red telephone boxes. Well, tonight, Matt and I are going to attempt to break the world getting drunk and urinating in public places record. We've got Norris McWhirter here, or Ross McWhirter, I'm not sure which one of them's dead, from the Guinness Book of Pointless Facts, to keep an eye on things.
That's right! And our big burying patch, who kicked the bucket last week, in the blue magpie compost bin.
And later, apparently, those two miserable cows from Laura Pendlebury will be turning up, because the producer's been sleeping with one.
But first, I've been out and about with the residents of Stalmine, trying to score an eighth of Black Moroccan.
Unfortunately, the actual recording of the Laura Pendlebury Adventures interview no longer exists for legal reasons. This didn't prevent the adventures, however, from continuing from strength.
Get off. Earthlings, this is the voice of the Pepperpots. Do not adjust your audio devices.
Now, leave them alone or we will eviscerate you.
Shut up, you gormless little planet. I'm doing this. Go and read your comic. Earthlings, we come from the planet Scab and are about to invade your puny planet. Put that down.
This is what the sound of a Pepperpot's failures do underpants sounds like. Although in my case, they're not that failures. These deeply earthlings and inhume our oily raggedness.
Get that microphone out of your ass, you disgusting metal twat. I'm not putting that anywhere near my grill. Stop messing around. You'll have my coffee over. Stop swinging your eyeballs, talk about. Now now look what you've done. You damaged the console. It's your turn now.